only two things I can't stand in this world. People who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch.
What?
Radio Friends with episode 316, and it's another installment in a semi-regular series of, I swear to God, guys, I'm not actually Dutch in any way, shape, or form. There's just a lot of bands I like from the Netherlands. If you ask me, it's probably the most underrated country for metal. You get all these classics like Osfix, Pestilence, Gorefest, Sinister, but also the lesser known stuff that's just as good. Polluted Inheritance, Perpetual Demise, Eternal Solstice. Just a solid country for death metal. But this week, we're going to be covering a black metal band from there. Name Unlord. Now, if you're a regular listener, you might remember last week, the 1349 episode, I talked a little bit about Norsecore, which isn't really a word you hear that often nowadays, but it was almost ubiquitous during a certain time in black metal's history. It was utilized as kind of a pejorative to apply to black metal bands that seemed like they would appeal more to fans of death metal and grindcore than they would to black metal. You know, stuff like Marduk, Enthroned, Dark Funeral. And I spent a pretty decent chunk of that 1349 episode explaining how 1349 doesn't really fit into the Norsecore category. When it comes to Unlord, that is not the case. These guys are the most Norsecore to ever Norsecore. All right, they make the third Cethereal album sound like the first Cethereal album. They're so fucking Norsecore that pretty much everybody in this black metal band was also in a death metal band called Nembrionic and a death grind band called Consolation, who notably have perhaps the worst album cover of all time.
Oh my goodness!
Brother, what's that? What's that, brother?
And despite all that, and despite the fact that this sort of death metal coded black metal isn't necessarily my favorite sub-style of the genre, I think they're pretty fucking great. And they've got a lot more credibility than people give them credit for, too. These guys actually started back in 1989, so real early for second wave black metal. Now, they didn't put any demos out publicly, and they don't have any official releases until their 1997 full-length album. Apparently, all the demos were just internal, like, rehearsal type shit. But in 1991, two of the guys involved with Unlord and Nembrionic, working under the pseudonyms of Necrolord, he who raped Maria, the giver of the gilded scepter, and Possessor, Lord of eternal darkness and ruler of the black earth, put out a demo entitled Pentagram under the band name Black Metal. All right, the band's just fucking called Black Metal. And as you would expect, given those very long titles, this shit is absolutely within that blasphemy / Beharit wheelhouse of super raw grind influence shit. A lot more Beharit sounding than blasphemy sounding. But I feel like this is a pretty cool demo that would appeal to any fans of that style in general, and I'm surprised it hasn't been repressed by Nuclear War Now yet. You know, you figure this would be the kind of thing that Yosuke'd get all over, but hey, maybe they lost the master tapes or something, I don't know. The only thing it really has in common with the later Unlord material is just the unbridled level of extremity. Unlord doesn't really sound like war metal at all outside of just being really fast and punishing. No, Unlord is definitely fucking mid-90s Norsecore, of the kind that the dog is such a fan of. In fact, his label reissued the Unlord back catalog in 2021, and they did a great job. My only complaint with it is they kind of moved where the Unlord logo was on the first album from directly over Satan's head to over in the corner. I kind of prefer the more symmetrical version, but I can see why they did it, you know? The logo's in that corner on the two subsequent Unlord albums, so it kind of matches, and it gives them an opportunity to show off that great album artwork even more. Speaking of which, goddamn if that isn't an awesome fucking cover. All three Unlord albums have pretty fucking dank covers, courtesy of Joe Patagno, who's one of my favorite cover artists of all time. He's done shit for Psy, for Angel Corpse, Balsagoth, a whole bunch of cool shit. As a matter of fact, he invented Motorhead's signature War Pig mascot and painted him on a whole bunch of album covers, going way back into the 70s. Point is, out of all the artists that Joe has painted for, Unlord might be the one whose music most matches the chaotic, hellish nature of his album art. Because that first Unlord album, Schwarzwald,
Man.
the first song on this album is entitled Inferno Bizarre, which is a pretty good title for what's going on here, because if you pay attention to the actual note choices in the riff here, it's pretty fucking bizarre. It's like a major key arpeggio. Only really sounds evil just because of how fast they're fucking playing it. Same with the riff that comes after the intro. The note choice itself isn't necessarily dark, evil, black metal sounding, but they're just playing it with so much intensity and anger that it becomes evil. Now, eventually you do get into some properly evil melodies. I'm talking shit that would sound evil even if you played it on a kazoo. That shit does show up, don't worry. I mean, you're hearing it right now. That sounds pretty evil. Then you got a part where they let off the gas just a little bit. Still pretty intense. But parts like this are a big part of what makes Unlord's sound work. They're important for the atmosphere, and it makes the heavier parts, when they do kick back in, sound all the more brutal. Like right here. They're gonna ratchet back up that intensity, and Jesus fucking Christ, that's fast. It's almost nonsensically fast. Brutal, blistering material. If you're gonna do the brutal black metal, quote-unquote Norsecore thing, you might as well go all the way with it. And this album definitely fucking does. The vocals, the guitar sound, the goddamn drums, just crazy levels of intensity all the time, even on somewhat slower songs like the title track. Stuff like this definitely shows up a Bathory influence, which was also present on that black metal Pentagram demo from the episode's beginning. And there's actually quite a bit of subversive melody going on as well, like that lead guitar overdub, but it's still mostly just intensely rhythmic music, mostly due to the strength of the drum performance, but also due to the level of care put into the structuring of vocal patterns. It really makes the song stick out in your mind in terms of memorability compared to some of the less dynamic Norsecore bands out there. It truly feels like the vocalist is giving you some kind of satanic sermon over the top of all this. Another thing that really uplifts this band over other bands in this similar blasting black metal ilk is that their songs have a sense of dynamism to them. A whole lot of rising, falling, and rising again action, like you're hearing right now. An entirely new set of riffs coming in with a new sort of lead guitar overdub. It's a bit of a cliche to say this, but like a lot of good metal, it feels like each song on here kind of tells a story. There's a very clear narrative to everything, and they can subtly shift the atmosphere, like right here where they change the right-hand guitar technique to something a lot crunchier and less tremolo types before they head back into those more expansive chords after the drum roll, this time bolstered with a subtle but very well done keyboard overdub that enhances the apocalyptic feeling of the track quite a bit. That strategic use of keyboards and more melodic guitar parts keeps everything interesting, despite the almost monomaniacal level of intensity going on throughout the album. And when those keyboards do become more prominent, they have a very unique sort of atmosphere to them. I've seen them compared to soundtracks to like a Hammer horror movie. It's like almost intentionally cheesy evil without being too silly on purpose. But then the black metal starts up again, and we're right back into the nastiness. Really blistering stuff that they then slowly let the keyboards bleed back into it without going too wild with them, alright? I'd never accuse this band of being a symphonic black metal band, but they do have just really well done keyboards. And then you got shit like here where it almost goes kind of death metal-y with how stop-start percussive it gets. You could definitely tell these guys were also in a death metal band, particularly when they get almost tech deathy, like right here. Kind of sounds like something you might hear on a Nile album, but it fits well with that blasting, blistering, infernal, monomaniacal sort of black metal quite well. So that first album, Schwarzwald, really solid shit from Unlord, but it's just so overwhelmingly intense that it's worth listening to and then maybe taking a break, which I have elected to do on this episode by looking at some of these guys' other projects, namely Nembrionic, the death metal band with the same dudes in it. I actually bought their first album, Psycho 100, way the fuck back back when for like $3 from a used CD store. Didn't realize that this was the Unlord guys until I started doing research for this episode. I haven't heard their second album yet, but their first one is certainly very interesting because it's got a lot of death grind going on, particularly in the record's first half. And the level of blasting is such, you can definitely tell that this is the Unlord guys. But here they're playing a very kind of mid-90s napalm death, sort of spaz grind mixed with almost kind of a disharmonic orchestra-esque, avant-garde, semi-melodic flair to it. This is actually a really cool album. I'm not sure why it's as unknown as it is. Maybe it didn't fit in with where death metal was going in the 90s, although it sounds hyper-modern to me. Particularly for 1995, it's almost intentionally synthetic, especially when they start going really crazy with the blasting, like right here. And then they slap you with an Unlord riff. I hear parts like that and I feel kind of for not making the Unlord connection myself. But then you get to kind of the second half, and particularly the last third or so of the album, where they start getting even stranger, leaning even more heavily into that disharmonic orchestra side of their sound, to the point where you get tracks that go like almost kind of mellow death, but with a weird avant-garde bendy kind of flair to it. The first time I guested on the Bunsen Burner Recordings podcast, I brought in Perpetual Demise's Arctic, which was a similarly kind of weird avant-garde, kind of semi-melodic death metal album to this one, and we came up with the term life metal for this kind of thing. It goes along with the whole Norse core thing, repurposing old metal pejoratives to actually describe a genre. Now, I'm not quite at the level where I'm going to start extolling the virtues of the second Convulse album, but I do like a lot of stuff like this. Particularly, the second Phlebotomized album hits a lot of the same notes as the latter half of this release, and in fact, if you really want to go on a crazy life metal journey, you got to check out the 4-part, 20-minute long title track to this album. I don't want to spoil everything that happens in it, but at various points there's female vocals, there's insane death grind, there's a weird deviation into krautrock. It's pretty fucking nuts. But with all that in mind, all of these progressive metal priors, did Unlord manage to put that to the side and muster up the requisite level of intensity for their second album, Gladiator?
Yeah, baby!
Of course they fucking did. What kind of poser shit you think this is? If anything, Gladiator's even more intense than Schwarzwald is. I don't know if I'm quite at the point where I'd say it's a better album than Schwarzwald, but it's in the same league of quality. And it brings back everything that made Schwarzwald great in a new, more professional form. Instead of having like, okay, this is a really fast song, this is a slower song, this is a faster song, this is the keyboard song, it's more like every song in this album does all of that shit in one go. Like this really weird sort of ascending minimalistic part happens in that same brutal opening track without feeling that out of place. Earlier on I mentioned how a lot of Unlord songs work because they feel like a story. Well, this one is a whole concept album. It's got a story where this monk finds scrolls that are records of a gladiator that lived in ancient Rome the same time as Jesus, was sort of a satanic rival to him, and was poised to take over the world for hell with the Roman emperor at the time, who was actually the Lord of Beneath, aka Satan. But then he's betrayed by his followers and dies swearing revenge, and eventually at the end of the album, the monk realizes that the Black Death is all caused by this guy, hundreds of years later. Pretty wacky stuff. And the music matches that level of bombast and almost fanciful evil quite nicely. Like right here, they work in some of those melodic parts from the debut in a more substantial fashion before going full martial militaristic with this rolling double bass section, to which the gladiator then proclaims his mastery over the world that he seeks to destroy. Again, there's that very tasteful rhythmic arrangement of lyrical stanzas to give off sort of a sermonizing feel. Big part of what makes these songs so memorable, before then unleashing the blast beats because it's fucking Unlord and they're gonna go fast. But they also throw in plenty of weird shit, not quite on the level of weirdness that Nembrionic did, but I feel like this drum beat and kind of the weird stilted cadence of the music here is almost kind of frog. I mean, you can't do that part for too long or you're gonna lose the brutal black metal crowd. But it is appreciated when it does happen, as are the keyboard parts, like this weird little outro with the doomy guitars on my personal track on the album, that being Victory, if you didn't catch Homeboy yelling the song title like 6,000,001 times over the course of the track. Real spooky, weird, creepy, but still very intense and hellish stuff. And again, sometimes it pays to take a break from that, which we're going to do this time by looking at the other weird death grind kind of side band these guys had called Consolation, which yes, did have the worst album cover of all time, but the album itself, the bizarrely entitled Brave Melvin from the Southern Point,
What in the fuck?
is honestly a pretty interesting slab of off-kilter death grind. I say off-kilter because while Nembrionic sort of looked towards disharmonic orchestra, this album almost kind of predicts where later Czech bands like TOOH would go. This very strange groove inflected, but also hyper brutal when it needs to be. Full of very odd riff choices and a lot of super jank sections and transitional bits. Like this bit right here could almost be a death metal era Napalm Death riff, like early 90s type shit. But then this fucking happens. Like, I don't even know what you call this riff. It's almost demi-lich level. I don't know what the fuck is going on. But it's certainly very spastic and odd. It sounds way more Czech than it does Dutch. And if any of that sounds interesting to you, I would recommend checking that album out. I doubt anybody's ever going to reissue it on account of that fucking cover, but I don't know. Pretty cool little piece of death grind. And that brings us back to the third and final Unlord album, which is by far the most intense one, if you ask me. Bordering on, I don't even know how to describe it, almost a parody of what their first two albums sounded like. The best way to look at it is to think back to another Norse core band like Marduk, for example. On their fourth album, Heaven Shall Burn When We Are Gathered, they had this track on there called Darkness It Shall Be that was almost them trying to do like a Vaughn kind of thing, because the whole thing was basically two riffs kind of chasing each other around. You had one that went like, and it would bleed into another one that went something along the lines of, you know, and it's kind of a cool novelty for how intense it is, but at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, gets a little bit boring. Now imagine taking that philosophy and expanding it out to almost a whole album, except it's actually fucking good. What? And that's how you end up with the third Unlord album, Lord of Beneath. The songs on this one are the shortest and most compactly written tracks Unlord ever put out. And it's also probably the closest they ever got to war metal. Like, parts of this actually remind me quite a bit of Bestial Warlust from Australia, but with that Unlord level of subtle melodicism and extreme technical proficiency. And I think keeping the songs that are way more intense like that shorter helps increase the overall impact of the music, because this record just fucking bulldozes you with these quick little rippers like that. It almost feels like a deconstruction of the stereotypes behind the Unlord sound. Like, even when there's a melodic riff, it shows up in the middle of just a chaotic storm like that. And that actually makes those melodic parts even more memorable when they do happen. Like this track right here, Horseman Out of the Cold, definitely leans into that super chaotic 80s black metal, almost war metal kind of sound. Just totally pummeling the listener with these bursts of chaos. But then it ties in a melodic bit in a way that actually makes a whole lot of fucking sense. And it's a great fucking melody, one of Unlord's best. And then when they go back into the more chaotic stuff, if you really pay attention to the note choice here, it's actually sort of a riff on the melodic part that came right before it. Before then it all collapses back into just screaming and stabbing and chaos and nightmares. Awesome fucking song. My personal favorite song on the album, Midnight in Hell, kind of takes that almost sort of epic, blackened heavy metal Bathory-esque feel of a song like the title track off of Schwarzwald and runs it through that insanity and primitivism of Vaughn with the technicality of Cryptopsy type filter that's applied to every song on this album. Like this riff right here, it's pretty much a Bathory or a Venom style riff, but the ultra dogmatic fast percussion under it is definitely not something you would have heard back in the 80s. Then you got this palm muted part right here. Palm muting on a melodic riff. Maybe a bit of a Hellenic black metal thing going on, before then exploding outward into these evil guitar harmonies over the top of everything else. It's definitely melodic, but it's also very chaotic, and it makes this kind of material fit with that hyper primitive thing they got going on in this album. And then a deconstruction of the heavy metal chorus. Like, this is just totally gonzo bonkers shit. And then they hit you with this lead guitar here, roughly at a early necrophobic level of quality and atmosphere. Definitely not something you would expect from an album this just fucking crazy and intense. And the follow-up bit almost kind of has like an early Therian feeling to it. And it's all existing inside this nearly a parody level of black metal, Norse core, death metal with black metal characteristics type intensity. Unlord's not really a band that I see a whole lot of people talk about, which is why this isn't a better than you remember it type episode, because I've only seen maybe 5 people in the course of my nearly a quarter century of listening to extreme metal even mention fucking Unlord. You know, this ain't really like a band you get clout for listening to, but to my ears, it's some decidedly good shit. And hopefully over the course of this episode, I inspired you to check their stuff out. But hey, even if you hated it, thanks for listening or watching, whatever you did, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
You shove those tomatoes up your fat ass!